But my key learning, I think, for me, and it seems to resonate very strongly with me, is to continually learn, because a lot of them have said the reason why they're successful is because they're continually learning and investing into their education and their mindset.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share conversations I've enjoyed with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits this has created. Get Invested helps you to live more, work less, and leave a legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, to make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living the dream. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at khgroup.com.au/Get Invested. Thanks for listening, and let's get invested. Welcome back, Freedom Fighters. Do you know what's the most common trait of all successful people across all fields? They are all lifelong learners. They're always questioning. They're not scared to ask. They're not scared to reach out to the best of the best and learn from them. They're always reading. They're always improving. They're always seeking and taking in knowledge and honing skill. But here's the most important part. They then action it. Today you'll learn from someone who really walks their talk in this regard. He's an expert at turning the best knowledge into the best action. Tyrone Shum is someone who has combined his passions for property and his skills in digital marketing into his own podcast, the very popular Property Investory. And it distills all of the best property investment advice from all of the best industry leaders. You'll learn about just-in-time learning, the power of 5-4-3-2-1, and many other very useful tips will help you on your investment journey. So please enjoy Tyrone Shum. Welcome back to Get Invested, Freedom Fighters, and today I've got the very great pleasure of spending some time with Tyrone Shum. I've been very fortunate to have had the opportunity of having a good chat with Tyrone some time back on his very popular podcast, the Property Investory, and he's been kind enough to reverse roles today and give me an opportunity to have a chat about Tyrone and his own journey so far. Welcome aboard, Tyrone. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me today, Bushy. It's a pleasure to be able to share and come onto the podcast.
Brilliant, mate. Now, for those that haven't had a chance to listen to Property Investory yet, and for those that don't know a lot about you, can you just give us a bit of an intro on who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm the host of Property Investory podcast, a podcast where we inspire, motivate, and bring light to the property experts all across Australia. We've had some amazing speakers and experts and property investors on this podcast sharing their stories. And the whole emphasis of this particular podcast is to get and delve down into their story on how they got into property investing and share why they got into property investing as well. So it's been a wonderful journey because I started this podcast back in 2017. And since then, we've had over 400,000 people download the podcast and also impact thousands and thousands of lives. Massive.
Yeah, I mean, that's an extraordinary audience you've managed to build up so quickly, mate. And congratulations to you in your efforts to do that. Mate, digging a little bit deeper than, and I'm looking for motivations here. Why do you do what you do, mate?
I love investing into property and love learning about how property works and speaking to the people, because at the end of the day, property itself is just you can say it's just a physical item that just sits there and people need to live in one or need to use one, whether or not it's for their own use or to rent it out to other people. So in itself, property itself is nothing much more than just a physical asset. What is interesting about it is the relationships and the people who actually build up these properties. And it's astounding how so many people can do it in such a short period of time. And what's interesting about it is that the people who have been successful, they've built it up one step at a time. And that's why I love actually tapping into these people, asking them exactly how they do it and sharing their story behind it, because it's actually not hard. It's very, very simple if you just follow a simple strategy and the specific methods that people have done, because there's so many proven successes already in the past. And furthermore, a lot of the people who have been really successful and really wealthy are the ones who have invested a lot of their money into property as well.
Yeah, very good call. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit later after we've sort of dived deep in relation to your own personal journey, because I'm keen to share with our audience some of the lessons learned there. But let me wind it back quite a bit now, Tyrone, because I sort of want to understand the motivations behind your journey. And take us back to, when you left school or around about that time. What did you decide to do and why? And then, because I'm wanting to focus on that why in terms of the changes you've made, and can you walk us through from there through until what you're doing now?
Sure. So back at school, I had a pretty good upbringing. I went to private school in Sydney and had really, really fortunate opportunities because my parents sent me to an excellent school that allowed me to get involved in not just academically, like do well there, but also in many co-curricular activities and also sporting events and so forth. So I had a very good balanced life when I was growing up as a kid, and it got me thinking, because there's so many opportunities to get into different areas such as like sports or into computers or into economics and so forth. And it was very, very much a big option to choose. And as I did well in my HSC back then, that's when it was called HSC. I think it's called some other term now. But when I did so well in that, I had many opportunities to go to university. And through there, I had a very strong interest in IT, because one of my uncles, who previously was the chief information officer for GE, he had a great influence on me to delve into more of technology and learn more about it. And because of that, he helped me out with my first computers, taught me a lot about how it all worked. And that kind of got me inspired into getting into a computer science degree at the University of New South Wales. So basically, after high school, I pretty much did what every kid would do, take a little bit of time off from school over that Christmas period, and then went straight into uni. I think my first class started in March of the following year. And from there, I did 3.5 years of uni at computer science. And at first, the first year of computer science, I was a bit shocked because it wasn't exactly what I expected in computers. They talked a lot about programming, talked a lot about logic and maths, and I thought, I'm good at that, but I never liked it. I was like, what the heck is this? So it kind of got me thinking a little bit more, and unfortunately in that first year I did fail a few subjects because I think I was too busy chasing after girls and exploring what it was like to be an adult. Because when you go to uni, you have a lot more there's a lot more opportunity, but also a lot more flexibility. So you end up just skipping class and doing whatever you want. So I learned a big lesson there, is that if you don't put your mind to it, things can really, go south for me. And that's what happened. There was a big turning point at that time, because I was questioning myself, is computer science really for me, or technology really for me as a career? And at that point, one of my aunties actually gave me a book, which coincidentally came out only a few years prior to that, called Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm sure a lot of people have read. It's one of the yes, it's probably one of the biggest recommended books on the Property Investory podcast by all property investors. And that particular book really propelled me forward into looking at opportunities in terms of business, property, and shares, and all the things that are potential for entrepreneurs. And when I read that book, it kind of opened up my eyes, going, wow, I didn't realize there's actually more to this than just going to uni, getting a good job and pursuing a career in that. And it kind of made me move into a different direction, saying to myself, look, I'll finish my degree, finish the last 2 years of what I need to do in computer science, but I'm not going to stick with computers and just move on to my own business. And that's what I actually did. Was I started a vending machine business in the first year of uni, like towards the end of uni, after reading that book. And also learning a little bit more about real estate. So after I finished my degree, long story short, was I went straight into real estate, and I acted as an agent for LJ Hooker and also for
Did you?
Ray White as well. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Awesome, mate. So the penny that dropped out of, and I call it my Kiyosaki moment as well, was the passive income exercise. Is that what the major change in your thinking was at that time, and the benefit of property as a means to help create that? Is that
Absolutely. That
yeah?
was exactly right. And that's the reason why I went down that path, because from what Robert Kiyosaki taught us in there is, rather than work for your money, being in the E quadrant, look at business opportunities where you can generate passive income. So that way you don't have to work hard and you become a B or I quadrant. B stands for business owner and I for investor. And to this day, it's always been my mindset behind that.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome that you are able to pick that up so early in the journey for you, mate. Because a lot of people don't even start thinking about that until they're well into 30s, 40s, and even sometimes 50s. So it's. Can you remember? And I'm really drilling down here, but taking us right back to what was it that made you pick up that book?
I think it was because it was very easy to read. The thing I remember very clearly was that night when I got that book from my auntie, she said, just have a read of it, it's easy read. And when I first picked up the book and started reading the first chapter, I couldn't put it down. So the whole night I was up pretty much reading the whole book, and I think it took me only probably a few hours to get it done. In the morning I was like, oh, I didn't sleep. I read the whole book. So
awesome.
I think it was because Robert broke it down in very simple chapters and easy lessons. And from memory, there was only 5 or 6 easy lessons in there, which propelled me forward. And I thought, wow, I could just take some of these principles and some of these ideas and start applying it straight away. And that's where the vending machine idea came about, because he said he had a laundromat where he just go in, pick up the money, and then use that to reinvest. And the concept was very simple, but the whole thing was, if you can take that principle and apply it to anything that you see an opportunity to, your eyes open up to different things to do. Yeah. And that's how I came across the vending machine business. I thought, I'll go and buy a vending machine, set it up in a few different locations, and then just go back there weekly to refill and pick up the money that's been generated. And it worked out, quite well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so that's where my first journey started. And from there, I wanted to get more experience in property, because from what Robert was saying, he was buying property and he was generating passive income. So I thought, why not get into real estate? So I jumped into real estate and became an agent for the first 3.5 years or so of after my university degree.
And what did you learn from that? And then what was the next move and why from there, mate?
So getting into real estate opened up my eyes to what the real estate or the property market looked like, because I had absolutely no idea. I didn't realize that how fluid. I guess I wouldn't say the word fluid. Maybe actually, it's more like slow moving. It is in that kind of market, because there's no regulations behind it. Like, for example, if we look at shares, shares is all controlled by an electronic system now. But back then, you could actually see day to day how much a stock is worth. The price of it's live. It changes up and down every few seconds or so. It's very fluid. You can actually see it live. So it's completely different with property. It's like one day your property could be worth 100,000 is just an example. And the next day, if you go down the road and you get another value, they could say it's worth 150,000, depending on what you do to it. So you can easily add value. You can easily look at how the market changes, and no one knows exactly how much your property is worth until you actually sell it, because that's when it meets the market to actually get your price. And that's what really fascinated me, because when I was acting as an agent for a number of my vendors and became really good at that, all I had to do was actually present some comparables in the area, and looking at those comparables, I could say your property could be worth this, but I can't guarantee that it's going to sell at this price, but we'll do the best to achieve the best result for you. And that's where I learned all about the the side of marketing. I learned the side of how to negotiate with a vendor, understood how all the contracts worked, because you need to know all these things as a real estate agent, and also understand what things within a property make it very, very sellable, and also what things don't as well too. So you learn the ins and outs of it, because for the first probably 6 months, I was pretty much in the back of a car with the property manager who just said to me, let's hop in, follow me what I do, and just learn the ropes. And that's where I first started, because it's such an essential thing. Like, how often do you actually get a chance to hop into everyone's houses and look at it without them suspecting you're looking for something else? The only way to do that is a property manager, because you go in there to fix repairs or to do inspections and so forth. And that's the opportunity to be able to see what different houses are like. And the funny thing is, to this day, because of that area, which is North Ryde within and Macquarie Park within Sydney, I still very vividly remember what's inside a lot of these houses. And because of that knowledge I have, I can easily just look at a house and compare them and determine what prices it's worth. And that has given me a huge advantage on what to look out for when I'm doing, for example, property development as well too.
Massive. So let's talk about your own property investment journey then. When did you invest in your own first property, and what's it look like now as far as your portfolio goes?
So for me, I invested into a property when I first started with Steve McKnight's results mentoring program, going back about maybe 14 years ago. And I bought my first property in West Wylam, which was a regional town. And I bought that one for like $105,000 because it was positive cash flow, and it had a commercial and a residential section. So I got dual rent, commercial down the bottom, or retail section, and a residential. And from day one, it was positive cash flow, paid for itself. And I had that property for many, many years actually, and it pretty much did its own thing. There were times that I had some issues with the tenant, but I think biggest lesson learned was, rather than manage it yourself, because that's what I did, I managed it myself from afar. I should have got a property manager to do it. So I think as the first real experience of managing my own property, it was good. But long-term wise, if you're looking at build a portfolio, I definitely highly recommend to get a property manager. And that was, I think, the biggest learning lesson, because there'd be times when he didn't pay rent on time, and because I was the owner chasing him, I don't think he took me seriously. Secondly, when there was repairs to be done, I actually had to go out there and try and talk with him to try and help him fix it up and all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot more pain and a lot of hassle to manage that property initially. But I think the biggest learning lesson for me was once I got the hang of it, and then I sold the property off, I was quite happy to take that as being learning lessons as well. So moving forward for me, I mean, we bought our family home many years ago back now, and since then I've actually been focusing my efforts on property development. So that's where my journey is going, because where I live right now, very close to where it is, there's been a lot of rezoning and a lot of new train stations being built, and my focus has been solely on property development.
Brilliant. And on a buy, build, sell, or a buy, build, hold basis, or a bit of a mix of both?
Probably a bit of a mix of both at the moment, because my plans is to rezone the place, or not rezone, but get DA approval and then potentially sell off. But if it's feasible to build and the timing's right, then I'll probably go ahead and get it developed. But that depends on the property as well. So it's going to be all by case basis. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's awesome, mate. So, if I looked so you spent some time with LJ Hooker and then Ray White. There's obviously a divergence there at some point to then move into the digital world. When and why?
That's a good question. So what happened was, after I finished working in real estate for 3.5 years or so, I wanted a bit of a change, because I wanted to start my own business. And the business I actually stumbled into was actually a dragon boat paddle products-based business. And it was because I was actually doing that as my sport. On after hours, I was very heavily involved in competing. I competed at national level. We won, and we potentially had competition to actually compete over in, from memory, it was either in the States or somewhere like that. But I could have gone to international competition, but I stopped it at that because it was more hours of training. I was already training 3 or 4 times a week, and then if I had to commit to training at international level, it'd be pretty much every day. So I said, no, that's enough for me. I wouldn't be able to work.
Great sport, though. I spent some time dragon boat racing a long time ago here in Adelaide, and it was awesome fun. Great team sport, very physical, a lot of coordination. yeah, it's a great fun. So you still involved in it, or you've given that away?
No, I gave that away. I even sold the business as well too many, many years ago. I think that's what happens when you have kids. You just don't find the time to do as many of those activities. So, it was given up a while ago. But that's basically the sport I sort of stumbled across because one of my mates just invited me to attend one day, and I thought, looks fun. And then I just got really heavily involved in it, and it was a great sport to really get fit and make a lot of great friends and build a community and just get involved. And the funny thing was that I was also trying to find a paddle for myself because I was getting quite serious at competing. And having a paddle buying a paddle was quite hard because a lot of the paddles out there were not that good. Majority of them were wooden. But if you want to take it to the next level, you want to probably get one that's like a carbon fiber. And they're really light. They're like probably about, I don't know, maybe probably a quarter of the weight of a wooden paddle. I just can't remember the weighting of it, but it's just very light. And to get one of those, you'd have to order it directly from the States. So to order a paddle, from memory, the costings were about $180 Australian. And to get the shipping was about $180 as well. So by the time you import just one paddle, it would cost me $360 just to order one. Yeah, a bit expensive. So being the entrepreneur I was and learning about, how to apply some of the principle that poor dad taught me about business, I put together an order of about 40 paddles. And I said to two teams, if you guys order these paddles, 40 paddles, we can get it at a relatively good discount. And also too having shipping included. And that's exactly what I did. I took that opportunity up, and instead I got myself a free paddle. So instead of buying one full, I bought myself a free paddle. And that's when the journey began to start up a business to sell these things. And it took off really well. I ran it for about 2.5 years or so. And eventually sold the business off, and that's helped me buy my home, which is phenomenal. So that's where the journey started in business. And then from there I started subletting properties as my second business. So I'd rent these big houses, like 4 or 5 bedroom houses, and then I sublet them out to students in the local area. And that was my passive income for a period of time. And I did that for a while. So that's kind of pretty much where I got started back in property. And then eventually I decided, because I'm the type of person who gets bored quite easily if it's not challenging enough for me. So I jumped into numerous different types of businesses, and that's where I started doing a digital marketing agency, selling different services and bringing in different types of clients to help them. So I've done a little bit of YouTube marketing. I've done a bit of search engine optimization. And was my business for the last 7 years. So I continued to do that. Years? Yeah, for the last 7 years.
Okay, and again, obviously, you're with that entrepreneurial spirit. I'm hearing, and also I'm hearing someone who really researches something to the nth degree. It finds out everything about it and leaks in. Because the digital marketing world is a pioneering in terms of where that's heading and what it's doing. And that digital marketing tab covers 1,000 different evils sitting underneath it in terms of programs and approaches and all the rest of it. How have you weaved your way into that and created your place in that quite diverse but very big space?
So what was happening was during that time when I was actually successfully running the Dragon Boat business and also running the subletting business as well to generate some passive income, I had a few people actually approach me and said, can you help me with creating our website? And at that time, I had also discovered Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek as well. So that was also another pivotal point in my life where I didn't realize it was possible to live and outsource a lot of your work, because I kept doing everything myself for a while. And when I read that book and learned all about how to outsource, I learned how to also create a lifestyle and design it the way I wanted. I started applying on those principles and started getting clients coming in because they saw how I was creating these websites for these companies. And that's where my journey began. Was I had a particular company who approached me to help them with updating their website and also do some of their video marketing campaigns as well. And when I thought, oh, hold on, I don't need to do this myself, even though I've got the skills to do it and I've got the knowledge to do it. I actually found a developer out of the Philippines, and he pretty much did it all for me. And also I found a video editor in the Philippines too. And, for a fraction of the time and the cost that it would have taken me to do it for my client, I got them to do it. I made a reasonable profit from it. And I thought, gosh, it's not that hard. I just get the client work, brief my developer and editor on how to do it, and then they'll get it done and I'll deliver it and I make a profit. And I thought, okay, I could do this a few times more. So that's where the entrepreneurial spirit kicked in, and that's how I built up a digital agency and a business behind that. And since then, I've been doing that for the last, as I mentioned, 7 years in my own business, and also helping large companies for the last 3 years as well. So 10 years I've been in digital marketing. And at that time, where I got into podcasting, which is where this leads into property podcasting, was I actually was doing it solely to generate some business and interview some experts in the digital marketing space for my business.
Okay.
And I had already had about maybe 2 years worth of podcasting experience before I actually delved back into doing property, because ultimately what happened with me was I've always been interested in property, had a lot of experience just from my real estate days, and been always watching the market and keenly involved in it. But I just had this itch to go, okay, I wanted to just find out more and wanted to learn more from experts. And I'd been sitting on that idea for close to about 2 years before I decided, look, I'm going to start interviewing all these property experts, because I know there were some really good podcasts out there. But the biggest thing for me that was missing was the why and the journey behind it. A lot of them talked about the technical how to invest into property, where to buy property, and all the details and nitty gritty of it. But it was that why and that story that was missing. And I thought, I wish someone could do it instead of me having to do it. But in the end, I waited, nothing happened. I thought, all right, I'm just going to do it. Just, take it by the horns and just push through. And that's what happened. That's what's happened over the last year. It's just been phenomenal, because I think that's what people wanted just as much as I did.
Yeah, exactly right. You're probably reading a need that everyone else has had the same question, but you're the only one who's had the courage and the fortitude to go, right, let's do this. And given the background that you've already started to develop in podcasting in the digital world, journey is probably potentially a lot easier for you to do that. And I guess and I'm finding the same thing, Tyrone, that I was when I decided to start the Get Invested podcast, just to help people start to think about investing their time, their energy and money with intent, so that they helping themselves rather than let life happen to them. I thought, who's going to want to talk to me? And it's amazing. Perhaps people like to talk about themselves, so I've had very few people say no. And the ones that I thought wouldn't even have a think about it are happy to say yes. So it's and clearly you're very good at it, because the crème de la crème of the property market, I don't think you've missed anyone at all, and there's probably still others that you've got coming on board, but obviously happy to share all with Property Investory and just the easygoing style that you make it comfortable and safe for people to open up and talk about the ins and outs.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a phenomenal journey, and I'm very grateful that a lot of the experts and property investors who have come on have been able to spend their time, because it is an hour of their day to share their story and also their details and all the strategies and stuff behind it. And it's a real privilege for me, because I'm someone who just wants to learn. I just wanted to get some information and share that with other people. And it's just been an amazing journey to be able to do that.
Tell me, before we start delving into some of the learning you've taken from Property Investory today, I'm looking for common traits here, and it sounds to me like your passion for learning is something that's driven you right from the get-go, because it sounds like you did very well with your HSC, as you said, and that the only ones who do well are the ones who really get stuck into it and love the learning process. And I'm hearing that as a common thread through the rest. Where did that love for learning come from, Tyrone? Is that?
I think
do you know what drives that?
From a very young age. I remember my parents were always able to encourage me to read books when I was very young, and I think because I was I guess I grew up in a family where English wasn't my first language. So I struggled initially when I was in primary school to pick up English, and I was kind of like the little Nigel because I couldn't speak English. Funny thing is now I'm extremely fluent as an Aussie. Um, but in saying that, I think it was because my parents, they did encourage me to read a lot, and that's where I learned a lot. And then during the time of university, when I was struggling to learn about computers and picking up the Rich Dad Poor Dad, it drove me to learn a lot more about other things. And I've had numerous influences, like, for example, a few of my cousins who loves to travel, but also is very open to learning new experiences and new dialects and languages and so forth. She also impacted me and influenced me on opening up my mind to different things. So that
Right.
thirst for learning was there. My teachers, I had some really amazing teachers who taught me at school, and they also encouraged a thirst of learning too. So a combination of all those things growing up really did help. And then when I started getting into property, and because I had some really amazing mentors and also great principals who I worked with inside the real estate business, they sent me to numerous courses, which had some great trainers, and that also pushed my learning even further. So I've been very fortunate. I'm one who's a full advocate about education, because I think that really helps with developing the skill set that you need. Because if you don't learn it and you don't spend the time developing that skill, you can make a lot of mistakes. And I've learned that just through my time. I wish I spent a bit more time learning about property investing before I started investing. Then I wouldn't have made those mistakes I made. And I think that's where the learning really comes from, because it's so important. And I've done the same thing with digital marketing. I spent so many hours learning about so many different types of skills and techniques and strategies and stuff before applying. And once I do, then I'd action it. And I think one other key takeaway I want to mention as well is, once you learn something, you've got to try and apply it. So I try my best to do it just in time learning, rather than learn, then apply many years later. So as soon as I learn something, I go out and apply. And this is the thing that I've learned the most, because it's easy to get sucked into all that learning process, but then the whole learning behind it is the action part. Because once you start applying, once you take action, once you actually experience what it's like to do what you've been taught, then it really sinks in. Like riding a bike, if somebody just teaches you, shows you, this is how you ride a bike, this is how you turn the keys, this is how you get on a bike. You're not going to learn anything until you actually hop on the bike, push yourself, and have a few falls, and then balance yourself. That's when you really do learn. So it's the same analogy.
Great analogy, and it's really interesting you picked that up, because having spoken to thousands of would-be and potential investors over the years and helping them in that, what I find is that quite often the knowledge becomes an excuse, and the more and more they learn, and they're therefore looking for the perfect property opportunity, which never comes along. Years will pass and they do nothing, and time is often a very important ingredient in the success if you're investing in property. So I think that's a really, really good takeaway, Tyrone, in that you take on the knowledge, but then use it and do something with it, and then fine-tune things like chucking if you're in a sailing boat and you're tacking towards the horizon, then change course and divert as you're going, but do something, because otherwise head knowledge and paralysis analysis can really prevent you from moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the biggest challenge that we all face, is because there's so much information in the market, especially nowadays with the internet, the emergence of so many different social media channels and so many outlets that provide the information. It becomes information overload, and you don't know where to go. And I think that's been the biggest challenge I've been facing as well too, because I see so much data that comes at me day in, day out, and I speak to so many people. You go, which one is going to be the best path and so forth? And that's when you have to take a step back and go, okay, what are my personal goals? What do I want to achieve? And then from there, drill down exactly where you want to head. And rather than being led by other people, follow your dreams and your goals first.
Absolutely. Now that's a perfect segue into what I was about to talk about. In fact, talk to us about your dream lifestyle, Tyrone. What does it look like? What are you doing? Who with? Where? And then is that any different to what you're doing? And if it is, what are you investing in to bridge the gap between where you are now and what the perfect world looks like for you?
That's a great question. So I guess with my family and myself, I would love to be able to spend a few months living overseas in different locations. Like I've already experienced that already with my wife when we were much younger as well. We got to travel over in Asia and stay in various locations for a few months and just to absorb what it's like in one country. And we did that over a 3-month period. And just had so much fun because one, not only does it open up your eyes to what is potentially different to in other countries, because it gives you so many learning opportunities to experience culture, different types of food, different people, different surroundings, and all the amazing things that God has provided for us on this planet. We got to experience all those at a very young age because I set up the kind of business that I could travel around anywhere and be able to still have income and passive income coming in to be able to support us whilst at the same time experiencing what life was about. So I got to do that for 3 months, and I love to be able to do that again with my kids. I'm at a very, you can say, early age of parenting. Very young kids at 4 and 2. So stability for us and for them is key right now. And I guess maybe when they're a little bit older, and my wife and I've talked about this as well, is we'll do a little bit more traveling around down the track. But for now, while they're growing up at this young age, we've planted ourselves within the local community where we live, within a church, within schools and stuff like that, just so that there's stability and so forth. And we're happy the way it is right now. That's kind of like the lifestyle that we're living now. As we get older and things change, then I love to be able to take them overseas, as I mentioned, for a few months for them to experience what it's like to be in different cultures and for them to learn different languages and pick things up. Especially my son, he's a very fast learner as well too, and he's quite gifted in many ways. So I think he'll
chip off the old block.
Yep, that's right, chip off the old block. So it's hard to say exactly what my ideal lifestyle would be for the future, because kids would change depending on what kids is, because everything is now evolving around our kids at this point in time. But I think in terms of a happy and family type of lifestyle, where we are right now, stability and having a home and schools and church and so forth, we're pretty happy where we are right now.
Awesome.
And I guess in terms of
to enable that transition into the sort of the more nomad lifestyle. And it's interesting you say, because what you've just talked about is exactly what my wife and I, Sonia, have set ourselves up to do, is that be able to live in different parts of the world for 3 months at a time and have our investments fund the lifestyle here in Australia and still spend a fair bit of time here enjoying the ongoing interaction with the investors that we've been lucky enough to work alongside. But ultimately to be able to fund that ability to travel and soak ourselves into some rich and interesting cultures as part of the ongoing learning.
Yes.
But what are you going to invest in then between now and then to assist you to be able to do that, mate?
So I am currently investing quite heavily into Property Investory as itself. That is the podcast which will inspire millions of people around Australia, but also at the same time, the Property Investory podcast is just one arm of the business. As I mentioned, I am involved in property development and doing a bit of that. So we have Property Investory Group, which is the property development arm, and through that will help us to build and continue to build our portfolio, but also to continue to generate the income that we need to be able to, create a lifestyle that we want to go overseas and do those things as well. So that's what I'm doing. And I guess maybe to answer your question about the gap, what I'm doing right now is to continue to develop the relationships with the people that would be able to help us to get along that journey and to continue to learn from the mentors and to build those connections up, so that way we can actually close deals and put opportunities on the floor for people out there. So that's where we're heading, and that's our journey there.
Love it, mate. Well, it's absolutely spot on. Now, just sort of pivoting slightly, then coming back to Property Investory. As I've said a couple of times, you've in a rare and privileged position, really, in being able to have had the opportunity to have quite in-depth discussions with the best of the best in the property world. Are you able to share with us some of the top tips that you've personally taken away from that year and a bit that you've been having those discussions?
Sure. And this is the thing with so many guests we've had on the show, like over 150, there is so much different points of views, different mindsets, tips that they've provided, different books as well. And as I said to you, there's been Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad has probably been the number one mentioned book as well too.
Yeah.
And also interesting thing, The Alchemist as well too. That's been mentioned quite heavily, and
Yeah.
The Barefoot Investor too. So I think it draws upon those things. But my key learning, I think for me, and it seems to resonate very strongly with me, is to continually learn, because a lot of them have said the reason why they're successful is because they're continually learning and investing into their education and their mindset. And because of that, they're able to grow to substantial leaps and bounds. Because at the end of the day, property, as I said early in the podcast, is just a physical asset that just sits there. It doesn't move, doesn't change or anything like that. The only difference is how you perceive it and how you can bring an opportunity to the board or to the plate to be able to turn it into something that can be valuable to you. Because you could have a piece of property that is sitting out in no man's land, and people don't even value that because it's got no value. But then when you put it in the heart of Sydney city, it's worth millions of dollars. So go figure. It's exactly the same property, but just in a different location. And if you look at it from that kind of perspective, you ask yourself, what is it that makes this property so valuable to the other? It's because people value that one over the other. And in order for that property to succeed and to be part of your portfolio, or to add it to your portfolio and do whatever, you need to actually have a mindset behind that to educate how do you acquire a property like that, how do you develop it, or how do you add value to it, so that way you can generate, e.g. income, or do whatever you want with it, whether it be live in it or sell it, etc. So you got to have that knowledge in order to do it, because property is just property, but it's what you do with it.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. I often say myself, Tyrone, that if I got a better return out of kebabs than I did out of houses, I would invest in kebabs. But the house is a money box in the shape of a house that enables you. It's an enabler to allow you to do other things long term and to secure your future and replace your income ultimately. So it's good that you think about that, and you mentioned the comparison with the stock market. What I love about property, it is actually an imperfect market. There is no, in the stock market, everyone knows what the going price is, but every property in every area is completely different. So when people talk about a property market, I often smile, because there isn't really a property market. There's thousands of properties in an area that all have different attributes and different attractability measures, and then it's the wild card is that one person might absolutely love a property and another person's going to hate it. So and that's the great diversity, the interest, and therefore I think the ongoing ability for property to be a very strong asset class, because of the fact that it does have that diversity.
Definitely.
No, that's awesome, mate. What about, is there a sort of a common strategy that you've picked up from the discussions that you think has the most merit to you?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you ask that question, because I've interviewed so many different investors and developers and renovators and so forth, because I've had a broad range of people. I mean, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal for everyone who's actually been an investor is to build long-term wealth. That is a very much the overhanging, underlying message that they want. It doesn't matter whichever way they go, because everyone has different interests and passions and strategies that they want to implement. But I guess for me, the majority of them have been mostly buy and hold, and that seems to be the whole foundational aspect. So buy, hold, and potentially add value through renovations or subdivision or whatever you do. But what I've noticed is that a lot of the people who are actually growing massive wealth and taking it to the next level are in property development. And I've had a lot of property developers on the podcast as well share their story. And they say usually what happens is once you've got a foundational portfolio and you've built it up to enough that's coming you financially free, then what happens next is usually you delve into property development, and from property development, you're able to, instead of buying the property to just hold, you actually add value or create additional value. And you're pretty much making money, like printing money, I should say, printing money in your own backyard. So I that's what has kind of interested me further to look into, because ultimately the biggest and the most wealthiest people, like take for example Harry Trickerboth, or people like in Westfield, like the owner of Westfields, Frank Lowy, they all own and develop property. So the wealthiest and the biggest people in across Australia have been investing into developments, and I think that will continue no matter what, because at the end of the day, there's not going to ever be enough supply, particularly in New South Wales, for the current land that we have. And that's the reason why, for example, the government is spending and pushing a lot of money into growth areas for developers to come in to, invest into more developments and growing more properties, because our populations continuously grow all across Australia. And even though we say that, yes, it goes up and down cycles, and some part of the cycles we don't have enough supply, and other parts we always have over demand and so forth, there will balance out at the end of the day, and there will require that there's a lot more people to supply a need of properties for. Just to give you an example, like in northwest of Sydney, from what I read recently, by 2030, they're apparently saying that we'll need to establish at least a minimum of another 100,000 plus homes.
Yeah,
that's a lot of homes.
Massive. And the other couple of things too, because there's, depending on the government, they may turn on or turn off the immigration exercise. But what people are also forgetting is that household sizes have dropped by 40% over the last 20 years.
Yes.
So that's, to house the same number of people, you need 40% more. And with improvements in health, people I mean, they're predicting that the average age of an Australian in the not too distant future is going to be 95, and that's a 10-year increase. So if you add longevity to smaller household sizes to population growth, both internally and ongoing positive immigration, that's a massive demand driver for property. So when people talk about property bubbles and all the rest of it, I again smile on the inside, because we've got such massive drivers and such shortages around the country that property will continue to be a vehicle that will do well. We're just going to need to be a bit fussier in terms of where, because it'll be jobs and income that will tend to drive value. So
absolutely.
But that's what's exciting, I think. That's awesome. Fantastic. Well, I am going to encourage everyone listening to, if they haven't already, to jump onto Property Investory. It's an awesome podcast. I love the format. You really get the best out of people, mate. You've got a great style in terms of you're obviously really and make it very comfortable for people to open up and give it warts and all, which is sensational. Mate, I just want to sort of close now by doing what I call the ambush. It's a bit of a bushfire lightning round, mate, working off the old bushy tag. So let's start with what's your favourite quote and why?
That's a good question. Never give up. I think that is something that always continuously sits in my mind, because there are times where it can get hard and there'll be challenges that will come along the way. And if you continue to persevere and overcome those challenges, life isn't that hard at all. Like if you're in a situation where you've got a gun to your head and you're going to die, then different story there. But most of the challenges in a first world country are very, very small comparison to that. So never give up and keep going.
Yeah, brilliant, awesome. Now, you've already mentioned a couple of these, so let's look for a different version. But what's the top book you recommend and why? And we've talked about the 4-Hour Work Week. We've talked about Rich Dad Poor Dad. You're an avid reader. What else would you suggest people read?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm trying to think. There's been a few books that I've been reading recently, and And what's really been interesting for me, actually, I should mention there's been not just necessarily the books that I've been reading, but also some particular podcasts. But I'll mention a few of the
Right.
books that I've been reading as well. The first one comes to mind is the 5-second rule, Transform Yourself
Yes.
by Mel Robbins. That is
Yes.
amazing. I love that, and I apply that every day.
Okay.
Like whenever there's something that straight away
Yes.
that's holding me back, 5, 4, 3, 2,
4,
1,
3, 2, 1.
and just do it.
It's awesome, isn't it?
It's the best.
Yeah, Sonia and I have locked onto it as well. It's just brilliant. It enables you to break through stuff that otherwise you dwell on, chew on for days and weeks. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good in that sense because you just get things done. And it's nothing particularly related to property, but it helps with mindset as well. And I think that's been a really good book. Another one is called the $1 Million One Person Business, more business related. This type of book talks about the people who have successfully created $1 million turnover in their businesses, just running a 1-man or 2-man show at most.
Love it.
When I say 1 man, they run it by themselves, but they also have outsourcers and people who they don't necessarily have employed in their business. So that's really interesting because that kind of gives them a lifestyle. Like, so if you're running an online business, you can pretty much be a nomad traveling around the world, or you can be location independent pretty much. So that's been a really, really good book for me. Another awesome podcast, which I listen to on a day-to-day basis, and is called How They Built This, or How I Built This, sorry. Pretty much, How I Built This is a podcast about how very successful, even billionaires actually, successful entrepreneurs such as like Mark Cuban, people who have just built these amazing, big, large businesses. And it's just insights into what it is. And it's created, actually, it used to be, I think it is still owned by NPR, which is a radio station over in the US. But they interview some amazing, successful entrepreneurs. And you'll just get some really good insight into that. So I think that's been an awesome podcast. Those are pretty much the key ones I listen to and read as well.
Well, there's a couple there I haven't heard of, mate. So thanks for that. I'm going to leap all over those. That's really good because I'm like you, an avid reader, I'm a podcast freak, and always looking for great stuff that I can just be injecting some positivity into the equation. So that's awesome, mate. A little bit of a change on this quick one. What's the top thing that you've done to pay less tax over your journey so far?
That is really left to left field.
It is. It's a bit of a hobby horse of mine. Australians pay too much tax.
I agree.
Go into business to try and optimize properties are very useful in that regard. Or happening for me. Are there anything specific that has helped you reduce your tax burden?
Well, depreciation reports always definitely help. So if you haven't ever had a depreciation report, particularly for any new property, that has been a great way to reduce tax. But also too, depends on if you're an employee or business owner, but I would recommend, actually probably don't take me as legal or financial advice, but run a business sometimes, because when you run a business, there's a lot more that you can claim compared to being an employee as well too. So that's probably been another way that I've been able to minimize tax.
Yeah, no, love it. Perfect. All right, mate. What's a personal habit you feel contributes to your investment success?
Exercise daily has been one of the things that really, really helped, because I can definitely tell if I don't exercise regularly, my mind just starts to get a little bit, it drifts off a little bit, because your body isn't in sync, and also to eating well. So I think at the end of the day, if you spend a bit of time exercising and eating well, your mind really, really loves you for it as well too. So those are probably the two contributing habits that for me has been linked to my success.
Yeah, brilliant. They're absolutely foundational. I absolutely totally agree, mate. I'm a crusty old bugger and I still exercise every day.
You need to. For all
I do, mate.
For me, I mean, everyone needs to.
All right, now, just to close on there, mate, what's the best piece of investment advice you've ever received, and the worst?
What's the best piece? These are really, really interesting questions. I'm thinking this one through. Okay, so I think with best investment advice is seek as many opinions or expert advice first before actually jumping in. So if somebody says to you, no, that you can't do this, then go out and find 3 or 4 others who will tell you the same thing. Until you've got enough of those opinions, then it will verify, because it's still easy just to go in and get one and they say no, and then you go, no, I'm not going to try it. Sometimes you need to look at it from all different angles and perspectives. And the reason why I say that is because when I'm looking at, say, for example, a deal, somebody might say to you, look, you can only put maybe 4 townhouses on this block. But when you speak to other town planners and you've seen it in the other areas that it's possible they can put, say, 6, you've got an extra opportunity to put an extra 2 townhouses, which could mean an extra few $100,000 worth of profit there. So, don't give up yet until you actually get as many answers as possible. Now, in terms of the worst investment advice, I think it's like, I'd probably say to not to spend enough time or due diligence on something. Yes. So I'm just trying to think how to say it in a way where it's not the best advice. Okay, good one. Okay, this happens a lot when I'm at a party or I'm with family or people who are just not interested or that really into the property, and they say to you, look, that area is not that good, or why are you investing into that? And they don't even have a portfolio themselves. I would say they're probably the worst people to listen to. So people who don't walk their talk and don't have their own portfolio or even invest in property, but just tell you advice, whether it be family, friends and stuff like that, they're the worst advice to take, because they mean well, but they don't have the knowledge that you may have as well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's funny, in my book, The Freedom Formula, I talk about the law of inverse investment. And it goes simply like this: the people who talk the loudest about investing and most negatively are the ones that don't do any. So it's really interesting. The ones that who do it quite often don't say much because they don't have to. But the ones that are very vocal about it often don't do anything and poo-poo anyone who tries to. It's really interesting. Yeah. No, that's awesome, mate. I love that. Look, I know you're a busy man, mate, and I'm very, very appreciative of you taking this time. I just felt very comfortable with you right from the very first time you and I connected through the Property Investory. Keep up the fantastic work, mate. And keen to stay close to you. It's just you meet some people sometimes that you just feel comfortable with. And I like the journey. I like your values. I like what you're doing to share knowledge with others. So we'll continue to support and would love another opportunity at some stage in the future to have you back on Get Invested as your journey grows with Property Investory.
Oh, thank you.
And the country's a very small place, mate, and the like minds are very few and far between. So I'm sure we'll be supporting each other in some fashion or another as we continue to do that, mate. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Bushy. Really, really appreciate it. And love to be back on sometime in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tyrone. We'll talk soon.
Likewise.
How good was that? I hope you enjoyed it. To get a summary of all the investment gold and to get a copy of the show notes, email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.khgroup.com.au/Get Invested. And join me next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. Thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.